Welcome to The Explainer. So, if you've noticed lately that it takes you just a little bit longer to bounce back from a standard cold, hey, you are absolutely not alone. Immune decline is a very real biological reality of aging. But, and here's the good news right off the bat, it is definitely not some fixed, irreversible fate. The science actually shows us we have incredible power to support, strengthen, and literally restore a huge chunk of our immune function. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the aging immune system, understand a little thing called immunosenescence, look at foundational habits, targeted nutrition, and finally, essential vaccines.
All right, Chapter 1, the aging immune system. Think of your immune system as a highly sophisticated, highly coordinated military defense network. Honestly, for most of our lives, it operates with just extraordinary effectiveness, hunting down and eliminating threats like viruses, bacteria, and even early cancer cells. But once we cross that 60-year mark, this whole system undergoes a pretty profound transformation. And this biological shift, it totally explains why infections suddenly become harder to fight off, why recovery drags on, and why even vaccines sometimes just produce a weaker response.
Moving right along to Chapter 2, Understanding Immunosenescence. Okay, so the official medical term for what we're actually dealing with here is immunosenescence. If you've been feeling, way more susceptible to every little seasonal bug going around, this definition completely validates what you're experiencing. This isn't just one single glitch in the system, it's a really complex constellation of changes that simultaneously affects virtually every single component of your body's defense network. To really grasp how dramatic this shift is, let's look at the thymus. You can think of the thymus gland as the primary training ground for your T cells, the elite special forces of your immune military. Well, as early as puberty, actually, this training ground starts to shrink. And get this, by the time you hit 60 or 65, your thymus has dropped to less than 15% of its peak functional mass. Basically, it goes from this massive, sprawling boot camp down to a tiny pup tent. And that shrinking training ground has some very real consequences. A younger immune system has a massive supply of what we call naive T cells. These are the fresh recruits, right? They're ready and waiting to fight completely new, novel pathogens. But an older immune system, it has a much more contracted repertoire. It relies heavily on memory T cells, essentially the veterans from past exposures. Because of this, the aging body is just progressively less capable of mounting a rapid, effective response when it encounters a completely new threat. Which brings us to another major cellular change, something called inflammaging. And man, this is a frustrating biological paradox. Your first responders, like your natural killer cells and neutrophils, they actually become sluggish against acute, immediate threats. They just don't move as fast to fight off sudden bacterial invaders. But at the exact same time, they become incredibly prone to chronic, low-level activation. So they're constantly simmering, creating this underlying state of inflammation that actually drives a lot of the diseases we associate with aging.
All right, let's get into the solutions. Chapter 3, Foundational Immune Boosting Habits.
We're going to start right in your stomach. Did you know that roughly 70% of your entire immune system actually lives right in and around your digestive tract? It's huge. But as we get older, our gut microbiome tends to become way less diverse. So if you want to build a rock-solid barrier, the science points to 3 main goals. Try to consume 30 or more different plant species a week, add in fermented foods, think kefir or kimchi, and load up on prebiotic fibers like garlic and oats. That is what actually feeds the good bacteria. And that defense builds even further when we introduce movement. Now, exercise follows what researchers like to call a J-shaped curve. Here's what that means. A brisk walk, a bike ride, or a swim for about 30 to 60 minutes most days will significantly enhance your immunity. It literally helps preserve your new T-cell output. But you got to be careful, because hitting either extreme, like being completely sedentary on one end or doing extreme ultra-endurance exercise on the other, that actually causes harm and impairs your defenses. It's all about finding that Goldilocks zone.
Now, when it comes to rest, the science is crystal clear. I'll just read this quote directly. Deep sleep is the period during which the immune system conducts some of its most important maintenance and strengthening activities. It is so true. During slow-wave deep sleep, your body naturally drops its cortisol levels and spikes its production of growth hormones. Listen, if you're getting less than 6 hours of sleep a night, you are drastically impairing your natural killer cell activity before your feet even hit the floor in the morning.
But it's not just about physical habits, right?
Our social and emotional lives are deeply, deeply intertwined with our biology. Chronic psychological stress, combined with what the Surgeon General calls the epidemic of loneliness, absolutely spikes your cortisol levels. And that chronic cortisol elevation, it directly suppresses those crucial first responder cells we talked about earlier and actively drives that frustrating inflammaging process. Let's move on to Chapter 4, Targeted Nutritional Support.
Okay, what's really fascinating here is this exact target number, 40 to 60 nanograms per milliliter. That is the optimal blood level for vitamin D. And why does this matter so much? Because near-universal vitamin D deficiency is literally the single most impactful and easily correctable immunological vulnerability in older Americans today. Getting your blood tested and actually hitting this mark is an absolute game changer for your immunity. So the crucial point here is executing on a couple of very precise nutritional steps. Step 1. You've got to hit your protein target, which is about 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight daily. Immune cells divide rapidly, and they need a constant supply of amino acid fuel just to produce antibodies. Step 2. Zinc. An estimated 40% of older Americans are actually deficient in zinc and is absolutely vital for T-cell development. Supplementing just 15 to 30 milligrams a day can actually help reduce the severity of respiratory infections. Beyond vitamin D and zinc, the science points to a few highly targeted supplements that are fantastic specifically for adults over 60. You've got your antivirals like quercetin and elderberry extract, which actually has solid clinical backing for reducing flu severity. Then you have your gut supporters like specific probiotic strains to protect the respiratory tract. And finally, your heavy-hitting antioxidants like selenium and N-acetylcysteine, often just called NAC, which really help the body clear out those lingering inflammatory signals. And finally, Chapter 5, Essential vaccines after 60. Because we know for a fact that our T cells and B cells decline with age, specific vaccines step in to provide vital, safe instructions directly to your immune system. High-dose flu shots, for example, are strongly recommended for anyone over 65 because they produce a much stronger response than standard doses. You've also got pneumococcal vaccines to prevent bacterial pneumonia, the newly available RSV vaccine to guard against severe respiratory illness, and updated COVID-19 boosters to train those older memory cells against whatever the currently circulating variants happen to be. And I really specifically want to call out the Shingrix vaccine for shingles here because it offers an astonishing protection rate of over 90%. 90%! Protecting yourself against shingles and its seriously devastating nerve pain complications is highly, highly recommended for anyone over 50. It truly stands as one of the single most effective preventative medical tools we have ever developed. Look, the aging immune system definitely faces some very real biological challenges. But as we've just seen, you have an incredible array of tools to restore its strength. The science is absolutely there, and the strategies are super clear. So the only question left for you is, which of these foundational strategies are you going to take active control of today?